the community.
Hey, Equity
Hi,
Mate.
I just had a question.
Hey, Bryce, I've got a question.
Answered.
So this week we have a question from Eric Alvarez. He says, hey guys, quick question. I have DHHF in my portfolio, which is the Beta Shares Diversified All Growth ETF. Is it too much of an overlap if I also buy A200, which is the Beta Shares ASX 200? Are there benefits to owning both? So we thought this was a good opportunity to address ETF overlap and understand if it is a good or bad thing in your portfolio, because guaranteed most of us will have some form of it if you're at least doing ETF investing. So let's unpack ETF overlap first. Very simply, ETF overlap is when you have different ETFs in your portfolio that have the same underlying securities or stock positions. Multiple ETFs can track similar indexes, sectors, asset classes. So in Eric's example, he's looking at two ETFs that will have similar exposures. DHHF will have exposures to the Aussie market, so it'll have CommBank, BHP, you name it. The A200 ETF is Australia only, but will also have CommBank, BHP, and some Australia positions. So the question is owning both with that overlap, is there any benefit to that?
Yes.
So I think to start with, in some instances, you can't avoid it. And I don't think it is a bad thing. You just need to be aware of why you're doing it if you do have ETF overlap.
Yeah.
That's my takeaway. I have some level of overlap in my portfolio. You even look at S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, they're going to have ETF overlap.
Do you own both?
I don't know. Sorry, I do. I have FANG, and then I've got the...
That's a good example of
gear,
overlap.
yeah.
So you have an S&P 500 ETF,
Yeah.
and then which the biggest holdings in that are the big tech stocks. Like, so I'm trying to think, it's like something like 40% of that ETF is now the big tech stocks.
Yeah.
Maybe not that much, maybe 30% or something. And then you've got FANG, which is the big tech stocks again.
10, high concentration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of big tech
So that
stocks.
is a clear case of overlap.
So talk us through your thinking there.
So the S&P 500 is geared, so that's why I've gone with them, and like I want that, and then I just did want very concentrated exposure, which inevitably you get through the S&P 500 because it makes up something like 40 or 50% of.
No, I think it's like 30, but yeah,
30.
yeah.
But there were companies in FANG that that I wanted direct exposure to, and essentially I wanted to double down on those 10 companies.
Yeah.
I didn't want to worry about the remaining 450. I just wanted to go hard on those 10.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing. If you have an investment thesis that I guess means the overlap would be a good thing, great.
Yeah.
So, in the case, let's actually use the examples of these two ETFs. So DHHF is a global diversified ETF. It has stocks, it has thousands of stocks from all around the world. The Aussie proportion of it is about 35% of the ETF.
Yeah.
So that's 35% of DHHF is Aussie stocks. And then obviously 100% of the Australian ETF is Aussie stocks. So if you had $100 to invest, and if you put it in DHHF, then $35 of it would go into the ASX 200.
Yeah.
If you then said, actually, I want to split that $100 across two ETFs, so $50 in ASX 200, $50 in DHHF, then $17.50 of that $50 would go into the Aussie market, and then the whole 50 would go as well. So $67.50 of your money would go into the Aussie market. So that's all to say, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's how you want to construct your portfolio. But you've got to be mindful that if you do split your money equally and go into the ASX, you're pretty heavily weighted to the ASX, given that the ASX is 2% of the global stock market.
And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up with this. It's because they think by putting their money across more ETFs, you're getting more diversification. If you actually look at those numbers there, if 6750 total is going into the A200 via 2 ETFs, that's almost 70% of your money now exposed to the ASX 200.
Yeah, you're less diversified.
Yeah, exactly. You're less diversified than if you just put $100 all into DHHF, which again is the beauty of some of these ETFs that are constructed so the portfolio weighting is varied globally. So
now look, I don't know, Eric, but if I look at this problem and think about how I would do it, I wouldn't add A200.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think you're getting a nice mix of Australian, you're getting total stock market, you're getting developed and emerging market all through the DHHF. So it's essentially everything.
You're paying one set of brokerage.
Yeah.
It's just like less complex. You can build a bigger position in one stock. It's already overweight Australia.
Yeah.
Like 35% of it being Aussie is quite high, given Australia's 2% of the global stock market.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I think that's overlap, and in this instance, we wouldn't do it. But I think there's so many examples where overlap makes sense, especially where you've got maybe like an S&P 500. It's 500 stocks. I wouldn't be scared about buying individual stocks that are sort of in the middle of the index. You know, like stock number 100 in the S&P 500 isn't going to really materially move the index. So if you want to have exposure to that particular stock because you think it's going to do well, you kind of have to lean into the overlap and buy it yourself. So there's plenty of examples where overlap makes sense. The challenge is just understanding it and being aware of it. And then,
Yeah. So I think if you want to do a bit of DD on your own portfolio or help you through making the decision like Eric between two different ETFs, should you go both, just stick with one. There's a good online tool called etftracker.com.au, and there's a holdings section on there where they have almost all ASX listed ETFs, and you can see the weightings of all of the holdings within that ETF, and it'll actually show you the overlap. So definitely worth checking out.
Nice one. Well, if you want to ask a question, you can go to equitymates.com/contact. You can also record a voice note. We love getting your voice notes and playing them on the show. But after the break, we're going to be joined by Adam Dawes for another edition of Pimp My Portfolio.